my name is Wesley.
And my name is Dylan. This is Markus in his World War I officer's uniform.
He is going to show us the World War I trench at the Port Moody Station Museum and tell us what it was like for Canadian soldiers back then.
But first, we need to tell you a bit about this war.
World War I was called the Great War back then. It was a huge war and millions of people died fighting in it, including 61,000 Canadians.
The technology was so deadly that soldiers dug trenches in the ground to try to protect themselves. What were trenches like? Let's find out!
How big would a real-life war trench be? How big would that be?
Well, the real trenches would have been lots of kilometers. There were hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of trenches lined up. I mean, actually, all the trenches of World War I would go around the world once.
One trench would go all the way around the world.
Well, not one. All the trenches combined of World War. So that means, like, I take all the German trenches, all the Canadian trenches, all that. If you go in there, I can show you there should be what is called a trench map. You see, do you see this? This is a trench map. Okay?
Is that from a real trench?
Yes, this is. See,
so that's all the trenches.
And these are, do you see that zigzag? These are all those trenches. So see all the red lines, these are all trenches.
From every country?
No, these are just our Canadian trenches.
Those are like those dotted
So
lines.
these would be huge.
Right, and look at this here. Look, this was a really important book. Do you see that book? Can you read this? The Laos Problem. Now here's an interesting thing. In the Great War, the soldiers, they were sitting together, because I told you they were always itching, they always had lice or something. So they were sitting and they had a candle and they would burn the lice in the seam of their uniform. And don't worry, I don't have a single louse in here. So they would burn lice, and that was called chatting. To chat is a louse. So what the soldiers were having, they were having a chatting party. They were sitting around and they were killing the lice in their uniform. And while they were chatting, while they were killing lice, they were talking. And eventually it has entered our English language to chat, meaning to talk. But originally in 1914, if you had told me, oh, I've been chatting, I wouldn't think that you were talking. I know what you were doing. You were popping the lice in your uniform. So this is where I would have slept. I would have had maybe a little bench down there. Like probably little coal oven here, maybe a bookshelf. Yeah. This is a newspaper that the soldiers in the trench wrote, and they like to have sort of funny names. So it's called the Dead Horse Corner Gazette, because there were so many horses in World War I. They used at one point, this almost wiped out the entire population of horses in the world. Now, horses did everything. They pulled artillery pieces. Artillery is the big guns. So they pulled the artillery pieces. Horses would carry out wounded men. And of course, as an officer, I would sometimes sit on a horse and maybe ride and explore, look at certain things. So there were a lot of horses, but the sad fact that often, and that's why it's called the Dead Horse Corner, a lot of these horses unfortunately died because the conditions were very, very, very bad.
Wet, uncomfortable trenches.
This trench was supposed to be in Flanders. In Flanders, the water table is really quite high. So that means if you dig into the ground, soon you will hit water. So the trench is often filled with water, knee deep. So by having these boards, there would be water underneath, but often the soldiers were that deep into water. And then the problem was their feet were rotten, and they had to go to hospital. So it was really a big problem to keep your feet dry.
Where did they sleep?
They would have slept in these things. That's called a funk hole.
Funk holes were small, cold, and not very safe.
Soldiers would sleep with their feet sticking out, so if the funk holes collapsed, their friends could find them and pull them out.
Sometimes 2 or 3 soldiers would squish in there just to stay warm. Fighting in the trenches.
What, do you know what this is?
Oh yes, I know.
What is it called?
Look in there, and then it would.
That's right.
Look off there, and then you could see.
Spot on, my friend. Exactly. It's called a periscope. And you can actually build this. I don't know if that's something you guys could do in class or in school. It's very easy. It's a mirror here. And it's a mirror there.
Wow.
And that actually, if you want to...
If you hold it up,
absolutely. You okay there?
Yep.
I got it in case.
Can you see right over the top?
I can see it.
Can you see it?
Soldiers would look out over the trench and see a very dangerous place called No Man's Land.
No Man's Land was filled with barbed wire, mud, and huge holes from artillery blasts.
Out there, you were not safe.
But still, soldiers had to go out there.
They waited for a signal and then climbed the ladders. Gunfire would be everywhere.
It was scary and dangerous. Many people got killed or wounded in No Man's Land.
In the end, the war lasted 4 long years.
It took such a long time because it was so hard to capture the other enemy's trenches.
You should go to the Port Moody Station Museum to see Markus and the World War I trench.
Don't forget to stand quietly during this Remembrance Day. Remember the soldiers that fought in the war.